What's up guys, and welcome to the new studio, or at least a new part of the studio. For those of you that regularly watch, you will remember this system. This is an Intel 4th gen system that we recently put together as part of our tech catch-up. We wanted to take a look at the Intel 4th gen processor just to see if it could actually still game. And to be honest, this little system did reasonably well, but it did show its limitations. So today we wanted to see whether it's actually worth upgrading something like this if you don't want to actually change your platforms. So for those of you that don't remember, this is a 4th gen Intel system, and the CPU that is contained within inside is just a general run-of-the-mill i5-4460. It is a 4-core, 4-thread processor, and it actually performed reasonably well with some of the games that we actually tried on it. For the graphics card, we used a GTX 1060, a 6GB version, which many people would have been using back then, but it did show its limitations, particularly in Doom Eternal. The graphics card was pretty much the max out there, and when it came to Cyberpunk 2077, both components actually showed great weakness. So we wanted to know what happens if we can try to even upgrade this system, and for that, of course, we'll need to swap those components out. Now, the motherboard in this system is a very basic ITX board from the 4th generation, so there's not going to be any kind of super overclocking or anything like that we can do to it. So we decided to actually get a new CPU, and we'll try a different graphics card. The CPU that we actually managed to pick up was this one. Now, this is the i7-4790. It isn't the K version, but like I say, with the motherboard that we've got here, we're not going to be able to do any kind of overclocking anyway, so it seemed a little bit of a waste of money. Now, you can actually pick these up super cheap. If you wanted to pick up the K version here in the UK, you're probably looking at somewhere like eBay or CEX, and you're going to pay around £50 for it. We didn't want to spend that. We wanted to actually spend a lot less. And this one actually came in at a lot less. Just for the non-K version, we are talking around about £20. We paid £20 for this on eBay, and it will actually give us pretty much 90% of what the K version will. As far as the CPU goes itself, it is an i7, and being a 4th gen i7, it is still a 4-core processor, but it has a lot of benefits over the i5. We do have now up to 8 threads, which is great, a much higher boost clock speed, and we also have some hyper-threading, so hopefully that combined will actually give this system a little bit more of a boost, or at least we're hoping so anyway. Now, our first choice of graphics card would have been the AMD Radeon RX 5700 XT, and that's because you can get these at an amazing price at the moment, particularly on the second-hand market, and they are still pretty good graphics cards. But the problem is, this card will require an 8 and a 6-pin PCI Express connection, and the little 550 watt power supply in here is not really the recommended thing for this. It does need a much bigger power supply, particularly if you're going to try and push it. The next best thing though is obviously the AMD Radeon RX 6600. Now, the reason we've chosen this card is for a number of reasons. It is very similar in terms of performance to the 5700 XT, slightly loses out on a few games, but you've pretty much got 99% of it there. It is an 8GB card, and it won't suffer from any of the problems from the RX 6500 XT or the RX 6400 XT in its weird PCI lanes and things like that, particularly with an older system. So this card will actually make a pretty decent pairing. It is obviously a much more modern version than the 5700 XT because it's a 6000 series card, so you're going to get all the fancies with your FSRs and things like that. And you can pick these up at a very decent price at the moment for around £180. So with the graphics card itself being around £180 and the CPU coming in at £20, that does make this a £200 rounded kind of upgrade for a system. But is that actually worth it? Well, we'll get these installed. We run a bit of a DDU on the system just to get rid of any kind of old drivers, and it'll start afresh, and that's the kind of thing we're looking for. So we're going to get that done, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we've got everything installed in the system now. The graphics card just about fits in. It's actually got a tiny little gap below it. It's probably about 7 or 8 millimeters, so should be enough for the testing that we're going to be doing, but I wouldn't advise actually installing something like this into this because eventually it will overheat. Everything installed perfectly fine. The BIOS actually came up and said we need to restore some defaults, so we went in there, did all that kind of stuff. And then we got the drivers installed after running a DDU. So the system is currently running, and the first thing that we're going to do is probably just go back over the tests that we did with this previously. The synthetic benchmark that we actually tried last time was heaven. I haven't really used this benchmark in a while, apart from when we did the previous video. So I'm not exactly sure what it's going to actually do, but it'll give us some kind of measurement against it. Now, in the last time we ran this, we actually got around 93 frames per second. So hopefully, once we've done a bit of a run here, we'll get something a little bit better, or at least fingers crossed we should get something better. Now we've got the benchmark running now, and in the corner, it's currently saying that we're getting around 115 frames per second. Obviously, that is higher than the 93 we got before, but this test will actually change on different scenes. So we can't actually guarantee that's exactly what it'll going to end up on. So what we'll do is we'll let this benchmark keep running, and then we'll get back to it and we'll see what kind of scoring we got. Okay, so the test is coming to the end now, and the system is pretty loud. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but we're going to have to do something with that fan system later. And the test has actually ended. Using the exact same settings as previously, we've actually managed now to get an average FPS of 142. That is an absolute amazing uplift. It's a good 50%. And the scoring is obviously raised to around 3,597. But like I said in the other video, not 100% sure how good that actually is in comparison to others, because I don't really run this test anymore. The one thing that we did notice as it was actually running was that there wasn't any stutters. So in the previous video where we did the 4460, there was quite a few instances where the game would, or the benchmark would actually stutter a little bit. This was actually completely smooth, and I think it was at that point that we kind of knew we were going to get something much better. But obviously synthetic benchmarks don't tell us how well things game, so let's try the games again that we tested before, and we'll take a look to see how well they actually improved. Now the first game up is obviously Doom Eternal, because that's what we tried before, and we're already looking fantastic in the menu. This game averagely got between 80 and 90 frames per second before. There was a few dips to 80, which was obviously completely more than playable anyway, so it's going to be great to see what this system now actually does to increase. We're currently averaging, and we'll reset some stats, around 193. So again, we have near enough doubled the performance. It's got a few little dips now down to 167, and this is running in 1080p high settings, so it's going to be more than enough for anybody. But it's actually fantastic to see how such an old system, particularly with a 4th gen, it's quite old now, nearly 10 years old, can actually get this kind of performance out. I'm surely going to die in this game now, but we'll just have a bit of a run around and we'll see what it actually drops to, if we get any big stutters or anything like that. There's nothing so far. We are averaging around 190 frames per second, so that is absolutely fantastic. It was a bit of a dip then to 150, but again, you know, more than playable than anything, and it is increasing up to 130 here. If we were actually to enable something like VSync or Radeon Chill, it would actually smoothen out perfectly, and we could run it at 60 FPS very easily. We could even actually just ramp up the settings a little bit and probably play the game in ultra, so that's actually pretty cool. But that's really good to see that if you have an older system like this, a quick upgrade, and probably what we could actually consider a budget upgrade on a system like this, really does bring a little bit more life to it when we play games like this. But of course, this game played perfectly fine before, so the real test is going to come when we actually test the next one, and for that we're going to be testing Cyberpunk 2077. So the last time that we played Cyberpunk 2077 on this system, we couldn't actually get anywhere over 30 frames per second, and that didn't matter what settings we actually used. We even tried FSR, we tried dropping the resolution, we tried dropping the settings down to low, and the system just wouldn't get past that 30 frames per second, and that is mostly down to the CPU. So hopefully with a new CPU, we're going to actually change that up, and we're going to get something that's a little bit more playable. We're just waiting for the game to load now, and we've actually configured it to just be a pretty standard setting. It is in 1080p with a high preset. There's no FSR, no XESS, nothing like that actually added to it. So we're going to see whether we can actually beat that 30 frames per second. We'll try and hit a target of 60. We'll try and see what we can do to actually hit that target, but hopefully we can with the new components. I don't really have an issue with the graphics card. I think the graphics card is more than capable. It's really that CPU that I'm hoping doesn't hold things back. But let's get into the game and take a look. The system is starting to ramp up now. It's getting a little bit warm, and as we can see from the stats in the corner, the i7-4790 is currently running at around 60%, with the Radeon RX 6600 currently running at about 97, and that is absolutely fantastic to see, because it means that the CPU is actually able to cope with this graphics card perfectly fine. The graphics card's near enough maxed out, so it's getting pretty much fully utilized. This game now is actually way more smoother than it was before. We're getting pretty decent 1% lows. Our current average FPS is around 56, so that's fantastic. That's more than playable to most people, so they're going to pretty much get a decent experience out of this. Nothing's really happening. There's no major stutters. The 1% lows are currently sitting at about 40, which makes it playable. It is more than playable. There's no visible stuttering or anything like that. It's just dipped a little bit as we've come into the town now to about 33. So maybe we can improve the 1% lows a little bit, but the CPU, now that we've jumped into a bit more of a busy area, is actually starting to creep up. It's currently running at 99%, which is not great. It means that the Radeon RX 6600 is not really being fully utilized, but they're both competing quite well, and it's actually providing a pretty decent playable experience. The more we get into the built-up areas, obviously that average FPS is dropping, so let's see what we can do in the settings to see if we can actually bring that down a little bit and see if we can boost the frames per second to maybe a consistent 60. The first thing that we will try is we'll jump to the settings, we'll go to the graphics options. It's currently on a quick preset of custom because we set it to high, so we're going to drop it down to a medium, and we're going to continue to turn off AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution because we don't want no help at the moment, and we'll get back into the game. So visually the game looks very similar, but we have had that boost in the frames per second that we wanted. Now if you are sitting on a system with something like the i5-4460 in it, you'd be glad to know that you don't need to completely change your platform if you want to play a selection of games like that. Now, I don't know how they would actually perform when it comes to those real super kind of unoptimized modern kind of releases like your Last of Us and Hogwarts and things like that. I'm sure you will find some kind of issues there because there is always a reason why we upgrade our platforms. But if you are sitting on something like this and you want that little bit of a boost in your gaming performance, you could go out and purchase for just £20 an i7-4790. You will lose the ability to do overclocking because it's not the K processor, but it is about half the price. And if you were to pick up something like the RX 6600, or if you've got a power supply big enough, pick up something like the RX 5700 XT, you're actually going to boost your gaming performance by nearly double. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you run an older 4th gen system, and what are you playing? Would you consider an upgrade like this, or are you actually already running the i7-4790, and what kind of experiences are you getting? Now this system is a little bit noisy, as we've said a few times on the video, and we have some plans for it going forward. We may remove this graphics card and put something in a little bit smaller. We're going to keep the CPU in it, but I really want to get that noise down. And because we want to start playing with some new things now, I think you're going to really enjoy those videos. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notification so that you know when our videos are dropping. But anyway, I'm going to go and have a bit of a tinker with this system, and I'm sure we will catch you in the next one.